Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back to Paris History, Avec Hemingway. I'm back with Claudine, and today we are talking about the area of Montparnasse. Now, you may know the Montparnasse Tower. It's kind of an eyesore on the Parisian landscape. A lot of Parisians don't like that giant building. But there's also a lot more history to the area. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the best restaurants, the history, what's going on over there. And I'll let Claudine take it from here.
Yeah, Montparnasse, it is. A lot of people know of the tower, which some people like to say it was the box that the Eiffel Tower came in.
Oh, that's funny. I've never heard that.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at it right outside my window right now, and I hate the fact that it's in the view of my towers of Saint-Sulpice. But it's, and also my grandpa in his diaries, and I've heard this from many people, they call it the Awful Tower.
The Awful Tower.
But they're spending billions of dollars to change the entire outside of it.
Wait, what?
Yeah, they're basically, and I'll see if I could find some photos on the internet and put it on my website for this episode. But they are actually like installing all these things so they would have like terraces and stuff. So they're going to make the outside of it look better by the Olympics.
Oh, that's so interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It is kind of, and when it was being built in the 70s, I have pictures that my grandpa took of it as it was being built. So when it was only 15 stories.
Oh, that must be cool. I want to see that. It's like when you see those pictures of the Statue of Liberty being built, like Juvenwa. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. But yeah, I look right out my window and I see the two beautiful towers of Saint-Sulpice, and then I see Montparnasse.
It's like the main view from our living room too. It's like, I wish that was the Eiffel Tower and not that.
Yeah, I just lean forward. If I lean forward to where I am right now, I block it out by the window. But Montparnasse itself, the name of it goes back to ancient Greece, and Apollo and his 9 muses lived at the mountain of Parnasse. So that is why it is Montparnasse. It is the 9 muses were those that inspired creativity, and I'm obsessed with finding these in art in the Louvre. There are some paintings that include some of them. It is also, if you saw one of the greatest movies ever made, Xanadu with Olivia Newton-John, is one of the muses, and that's probably why I love it. But all of the muses they inspired, there's tragedy, dance, poetry, astronomy, lyrical painting, poetry, but there's no art. There's no painting, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But and Louis XIV had decided once in 1667 to have an observatory built. That's another pretty big building that if you are kind of at the other end of Boulevard Montparnasse, you see this really cool looking observatory. It's kind of basically at the bottom of the Jardin de Luxembourg. So basically when you get to the very bottom of the Jardin de Luxembourg, because where you are north in Montmartre, and then I'm more south, but the end of the smaller side of the Jardin de Luxembourg is considered south, so it's the lower, even though you kind of want to think of it as upper. But it is basically that is where Montparnasse is. And around that area, there is probably what most people know about that is the fantastic different cafes up there that were made very popular during the 1920s and the Lost Generation.
Yeah, that's when the artists all moved from Montmartre to Montparnasse.
Yeah, because it was cheaper once Montmartre was getting expensive and they were taxing the wine and it was pulling into the city. They decided to move over to Montparnasse, and around that area in that general area is where Modigliani and Gauguin and all of these artists lived. And then a lot of them hung out at the major cafes that are still there today.
Yeah, I don't ever go over there because it's literally on the opposite side of where I live, and I can like see it from my living room. And I'm like, why would I go there? I'm in Montmartre. It's like the Montparnasse. But
And I've actually been there a couple times lately. I have actually gone to a couple of these different restaurants, and it has been fantastic. So I'll share a little bit of that. But one of the ones that is very famous there is actually not really there anymore. It is a different restaurant altogether now, but it was once called the Dingo American Bar. And when you see a lot of the ones up there will say it's an American bar, but that does not mean it's because it's where Americans go. It was basically their way of telling you that they serve cocktails.
No way. I didn't know that.
Yeah, because back then, and even still now, I mean, there's so many places that you go to, that you only could get beer or wine, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so back then, here are these Americans, and especially during Prohibition, they came over here and they're like, we want our booze. And so that's why they were called American bars.
That's so cool to know. The cocktails.
Yeah, the cocktails. So there was the Dingo American Bar, and it is now the Auberge de Venise. It's an Italian place, but that is where Hemingway met F. Scott Fitzgerald, was in the Dingo Bar.
Oh, and now it's called something different, though.
Yeah, so now it's called something different, but there are some plaques in there that do. It says Fitzgerald, and there's one that says Hemingway, and there's like a little brass plaque that has something about the fact that they met there. So they still hold on to it a little bit. In April of 1925, Don Stewart introduced Hemingway to F. Scott Fitzgerald there. Hemingway had already read The Great Gatsby, that of course Fitzgerald wrote, and thought it was amazing. The restaurant itself opened in 1923. And then it was a gentleman named Monsieur Harrow, and he named it Dingo after the nickname of the old dingo who was a boxer named Jimmy Sharp.
I think of dingo, I think like Australian, like kangaroo or something.
In that movie where she says the dingo ate my baby.
Yeah, exactly. I forgot about
that. We're really going off on it, like a whole other avenue. But they'd hang out there. Hemingway always kind of, when you come to those three places we've talked about before in Boulevard Saint-Germain, which you have, Dumago, you have Fleur and Leap, he always kind of gravitated to the place that not everybody, hung out. He was like the Leap. He liked Dingo better than a lot of the other ones, but none of these restaurants now, think of that, they all claim it as like his favorite place.
They love to use that name, throw it around.
They do. But it was the Dingo was where he actually kind of hung out, and that's where they were. And that is actually where Hemingway saw Josephine dancing, Josephine Baker, and she was dancing, and she had said that she had nothing on underneath her fur coat. And of course, everybody was completely like just obsessed with watching her. Yeah, but it was it was also on that same, if you go down that same street that the Dingo was, the Auberge is now, it's also where Modigliani lived, and that was also where his parents lived down that street. And when he died, his girlfriend, who was also pregnant at the time, could not stand life without him and jumped out the window.
Oh, yeah, I remember talking about that. It's so horrible.
Yeah, so horrible. But you go around the corner and you have you have the major restaurants that are there. There is the Le Café de Dôme, the Dome. It opened in 1898. Inside these restaurants are gorgeous. I am a person that loves to just sit out on the terrace and watch people. But sometimes there's places that you definitely want to go poke your head in, and I need to actually do that more often because I don't. And then sometimes I have no idea these amazing, beautiful facades that are inside. It is a lot of Art Deco in there. It's got these amazing, amazing stained glass windows. It was designed by a designer named Paul Chambron. He did a lot of the Montparnasse cafes up there. Back then, the artists could eat very inexpensively there because that's why they loved. And the food was really started out, it was of the Auvergne region. Today, it is quite expensive. But back then, all of these places, were, of course, much cheaper because it was 100 years ago.
100 years ago.
Yeah, literally 100 years ago. But in 1958, when Paul Chameroy died, his funeral was attended by the artists and all the writers of Paris. Henry Miller used to sit out on the terrace all day with his coffee cup, just stacking up one coffee cup after another, and wait for people to walk by and offer to pay for him.
What?
Yeah. Some days he sat there for the entire day until somebody would come by and offer to pay for his coffee.
All the coffees.
All the coffees that he had. Now, they won't care. You could order one coffee and sit there all day long, and most cafes don't really even care. But in the heyday of the Dome, it's kind of been long gone. During the pandemic, they had closed up and sealed all the windows and everything. But luckily, it's been reopened, and I just was there earlier, just a few days ago, and went with a friend of mine, Catherine, and had a seafood tower, which was something I'd always wanted to do. And this giant tray of ice with all sorts of seafood on it, all pretty well, most of it, raw oysters and some clams and all sorts of great stuff. It was absolutely fantastic. And when I walked in, the maitre d' made me hold his arm, and then he was holding my hand to take me to the seat. And then when I came out of the restroom, I noticed all of these brass plaques all over the door walls that said Modigliani and other people with photos. And so I went up and I was like, Uwe Ernest Hemingway. And then they were just like, oh, and they walked me over and showed me one picture, no plaque. But the menu has a whole entire 3-course lunch that you could get called the Ernest Special.
But he doesn't even get a plaque?
No. And I was like, I think we need to work on this, buddy.
Just wrong.
Yeah, but it's beautiful inside, and the staff there is really, really nice. Also on the street is La Couple, and it was open on December 20th, 1927, by Ernest Fro and his brother-in-law, René Lafort, who had worked at La Dome. It was once a coal depot before the restaurant was built. It was built over the former quarries and the catacombs. 32 pillars had to be created and built underneath it to hold up the structure, because basically they took, all of the bedrock and everything out of it. But it made for the perfect place for a wine cellar. So they have a very, very big wine cellar. On opening night there, all of Paris came, including Josephine Baker. 1,200 bottles of champagne were said to have been drank that one night.
1,200? Wow.
Yeah, we missed that party.
Seriously, it's a party I want to be at.
Yeah, but there was a bartender that was there that never missed a thing, and he served kind of as the gatekeeper for everybody. A lot of these artists and expats would use the Couple as as their post office, and they would take phone calls there. So if somebody was looking for him, they might call and say, is Picasso around? Tell him to give me a call when you see him. So people would go by, and they actually had these little wooden boxes that they would have for each person, where they put mail and messages in.
That's so cool.
Yeah. This one is all Art Deco in there. Many of the artists, including Picasso, were asked to paint the 32 pillars that go through the restaurant. Many of them painted them in lieu of, giving them food and drinks. But they realized later that actually cost them a lot more money to say that they always got to have free food and drinks than it probably would have paid to pay for the actual art.
Yeah, they probably should have just took some money.
Yeah, but now, sadly, none of those really remain. A 33rd pillar was added in 1988 when a staircase had been removed. But most of all of the other ones have been completely removed.
Oh, that's so sad.
Art. Yeah, which is very sad. My grandparents went there, I think it was either the 70s or the 80s, and brought back the cutest little Limoges, espresso cup. And it says La Couple on it, and I have that, and I use that as my little espresso cup when I'm not in Paris.
I love that.
Little reminder. Right across the street is another one that's great. That's La Select. It was opened in 1924. So all of these places basically opened in the 20s. So they're all coming up to 100 years. They opened in 1924 by a husband and wife, the Jalberts. It was the first one open in Montparnasse, and it was the first one to be open for 24 hours a day. And mostly journalists would come there at the end of the day at 2 a.m. when they had filed their stories for that issue. And they would come there and have food and dinner and drinks, and also sit there among the different prostitutes that worked in the area.
As one does.
As one does at 3 o'clock in the morning looking for food. But mostly it was the writers and the painters that hung out there. And, because they each kind of had their own little, there was different places. Like there's the place that's just right below the Palais de Luxembourg. That was kind of like the black expats of America, where James Baldwin and some of those guys all hang out. So there was kind of like, this is the painters hung out here and the writers hung out here, which, is just crazy to imagine. Could you just imagine going back in time and, midnight in Paris, back to those places to just watch and be a fly on the wall? But it was actually James Baldwin who wrote most of his book, Giovanni's Room, which is probably his most famous book. He wrote most of it there in the Select.
No idea. Where do you think you can come hang out with the future celebrity artists today?
I don't know. I mean, that's a really good question. I did actually hear my friend John Baxter was asked that on something. I can't remember where it was. I heard that, but he was asked, like, where is it? Because that was really, Saint-Germain was really where all those guys were hanging out, and in Montparnasse. And I don't know. I mean, I think now it probably, because if you're just a struggling writer or artist, you probably don't have much money. So you're probably out, more closer to the edges, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, that was always kind of true, I guess, even back then. It's always living right outside the suburbs, all that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like the 10th, whichever, the trendy 10th or whatever everybody calls it.
I think that's affordable. I mean, Paris is becoming less affordable everywhere.
Exactly, yeah. But I did also go to Select actually recently and spent a lovely day having lots of wine and lots of oysters.
That sounds amazing.
It was pretty great. There's also La Rotonde, and that was just kind of there at the end. That is apparently also Mr. Macron's favorite place. And when he won his first election, he went there later for a little like end of the night party. Apparently he hangs out all the time. So I'm just going to go loiter around and wait for him.
Wait for Mr. Hottie Macron.
I know. After that picture he posted, they posted of him splayed out on his couch. I'm going to go hang out there. But the Rotonde is great because it faces there on the corner and it faces out, and you basically get sunshine all day. So there have been times that I've walked up there before, because it's actually not that far from Saint-Germain. And it's, sometimes on an early Sunday morning or Saturday morning when I love to get out, I will just walk until I find the cafe that has the sunniest spot and sit there and have my coffee and my croissant. And Rotonde is great because it always gets that sunshine. It opened first in 1911 by Victor Libion. He had two shops there that they decided to turn into one large cafe. He loved the artists and the writers, so he really kind of worked it around to really, appease them and keep the prices really low. He would sometimes take paintings instead of payment if they didn't have that, which, when you think of Picasso and Modigliani and all these guys, it was probably a pretty smart business move on his part. During World War I, Victor survived through the closings and the takeover because he made it, he would keep it really small. And he would not let the Germans come in, but he would let the people in the area come and basically pay like, a few cents to have coffee and sit there.
I'm surprised he could keep the Germans out. Like, I feel like it'd be kind of forceful.
Yeah, I mean, the Germans are really, they really took over a lot of Montparnasse too, and they were really filling all those cafes because there was cafes that would go up there. And, the last club where Josephine Baker performed and, Edith Piaf performed there for a lot of the Germans. And so they were, he would kind of close up. And so it looked like everything was almost closed, but then the people living nearby knew how to get in.
That's smart.
So he's very smart. When in 1918, he was caught up in a tobacco trafficking ring.
Oh.
And had to sell the restaurant. The new owners added a dance floor upstairs and a brasserie, and the prices also went up, and the artist artists left because they couldn't afford it.
Always happens.
Yeah, but it's pretty cool. Like when you go there, like when you go to any of these places, also go to the bathroom, because the one at the Rotund is basically you go up to the restroom and it's on the first floor, the first French floor, and it's over like above and basically looks out into the middle of the street, and it's just it's really lovely. Like sometimes some of these places, the bathrooms are really the key, and my grandma always, we used to drive us crazy because everywhere we went, she went to the bathroom, and sometimes she said, I do that because sometimes they're very nice.
Everyone always talks about the bathroom at the Ritz, like the swans.
Yeah, until one day I was leaving there, I wanted to go use the restroom, and the door handle actually fell off in my hand.
What?
And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was trying to put it back on, and I was just like panicking. But I was also completely beside myself because I was like, I just broke the Ritz. And then I left it on the counter. And then when I was laughing so hard. And when I came upstairs, I found somebody and I let them know because I felt so bad. I thought they're going to like arrest me at the door because I broke it. But it literally, like, you just turn the handle and it just came right off. Yeah. But I felt so bad that because I broke the Ritz.
I love when you can tell people you broke the Ritz.
I did. But I know some of my friends I was with, it was like, you should have taken it with you. I was like, no way.
Take it with you. Who are these hooligans you're hanging out with?
I know. Hooligans having me check out the bathrooms and stuff. But in 1920s, the Americans went there, of course, for all the drinks. He didn't like it, and because he thought that it was too much like the Greenwich Village of Paris was the restaurant. So he stayed away. In 1958, the restaurant was renovated and half the size went to the theater next door. So what you see now is smaller. And then, of course, that is where Macron had his 2017 celebration. And I don't believe he did it this year, just a few weeks ago.
He was just down the Champ de Mars with a bunch of kids this year. Everyone's like, who are these kids?
I know. And I was so bummed out because 5 years ago, he did it first at the Louvre. Like they did the big acceptance speech and then he went to Rotund. And so I had clients and we were nearby there for a restaurant. And I was like, at a restaurant for dinner, I was like, if he does a speech there, you have to eat up because we're going.
Hurry up.
Yeah, but he didn't, sadly. But also right outside there, just right outside of the Rotund is a long strip of land that is like kind of like a little bit of a park that separates the two lanes of traffic. And at the very end of it is a statue by Rodin, and it is Auguste Balzac, or not Henri Balzac, sorry. He, in 1885, Rodin was asked to create this statue by the Société des Gens des Lettres. And after 4 other artists decided they didn't want to do it, finally Rodin gave in and said he would do it. Balzac had died in 1850, and for years they had talked about building this monument to him. But at this point, Rodin was, later into his career. He was pretty opinionated. He knew he could kind of do and say whatever he wanted. And so he kind of just hemmed and hawed for about 7 years. And then they kept going back to him like, dude, where's this statue that we've commissioned and asked you to do? So he did the first version. If you go to the Musée Rodin, you can see the first version. And it's basically Rodin, who was not maybe what you would call the most handsome of gentlemen, at least the depiction that Rodin did. And it's basically of him standing like mid-stride, completely naked. He has this very, very big barrel-chested belly. Yeah. And he has his arms crossed in front of him, and he's just basically standing there naked. And when he showed them that this is what I created, they were like, no, this is like, one of the greatest writers in French history. You can't have him just strolling down the street naked. And so Rodin was so annoyed that he had a coat that was in his atelier, and he was so annoyed with it that he picked this long trench coat up. He dipped it in the plaster, pulled it out, and just threw it around the statue and said, "There, I'm done."
Wow.
And they said, "Well, we're not going to pay you, and we don't want it." And then, of course, after Rodin died, they also, of course, decided, hey, it is actually pretty good. We should keep it.
Of course, when they're dead.
And so when you see it, it is very awkward because it literally is this big, huge, barrel-chested man that's naked that just literally had this wet plaster jacket thrown around him. It goes all the way to the ground. And of course, now it's, there's the versions in bronze. But if you go to the Musée Rodin, you can see some of the other different versions that he had created.
Is the naked dude in the Rodin?
Yeah.
I don't remember a guy with a big jacket around him.
It's not, there's this one room on the second floor or the French first floor that is of his different pieces that he did of Zola and of Hugo and also of Rodin.
Okay, and then I can find the naked trench coat guy there.
Yeah, I will put a picture of it. I think I took a picture of it when I took some people there the other day, and I will put a picture of it because it is pretty funny.
I like it.
Yeah. But Montparnasse it is pretty cool. It's a really fun, especially on an early morning. You could also go up there and you could walk around and go down the very nearby Notre Dame des Champs, which is where Hemingway lived with his, when they came back after their son Jack Bumby was born. They came back to Paris and they moved into an apartment over the Sawmill on Notre Dame des Champs. And at the end of that street is the fantastic Closerie des Lilas, which is another great restaurant that was built to compete with the Bal Musette that was across the way, which is basically all of the dance halls. And that's just up. It's probably about 2 or 3 French blocks up from the other major cafes of Montparnasse that we just talked about. It's really pretty right now. It's Closerie des Lilas, with lilas is lilacs. And the entire courtyard in front of it is lilacs, and they're right now all in bloom.
Oh, nice. I want to see that.
Yeah, and I just recently on Easter Sunday did a live video from there sharing all of it. And, sadly, you can't smell through the video, but it's really lovely. And that is also another big place that Hemingway stayed at to sit and write when they lived on Notre Dame des Champs. They have a little plaque on the bar that just says E. Hemingway, but he actually sat outside in the courtyard. He didn't sit inside at this bar stool. But I did stop by there the other day and I was polishing it because it was very dirty. And I told them they needed to keep up on that.
What's up, guys? What are you doing around here?
I was like, come on. But it's a really, really cool place. And if I haven't eaten there, I've only gone in there and had like a glass of champagne, but it is really pretty. And when I was walking out, there was a gentleman sitting at a table with his laptop. And I thought, oh, that's kind of just like Hemingway. Now he'd have his laptop.
Have his typewriter.
Yeah, he'd have his typewriter out there. But it's really pretty. And it's right in front of, it's basically right at the very end of the Luxembourg. And that's right where you see the big, really cool fountain that is a fountain of the 4 corners of the world.
Ooh, yeah. Now you're making me want to go to Montparnasse and not just look at it from my window because I'm like, nothing over there. I don't care. Yeah. But
it isn't really. I mean, you're really close to Montparnasse Cemetery, which is also really, really interesting to go walk through and check out, which is always really fun to come across any of the cemeteries to go through. But it's a pretty cool little area and not very far from Saint-Germain at all.
Well, I'm going to know what I'm going to visit next week when I have a day off. Go eat some seafood towers.
I'll meet you over there. We can have some seafood.
I love it. I know I'm from Maryland though, so I'm pretty picky about my seafood, but I guess I could give it a try. Were you impressed with the seafood tower?
It was really good. And there was these little things, I don't remember what they're called, but they look like little, look like little seashells you'd find on the beach, and you kind of pull these little guys out. They're kind of almost like a sea escargot.
Yeah, they always give me those at La Mascotte in Montmartre, and I'm like, these are so much work.
They're really good though, and they actually they're cooked, but they kind of have like a little spiciness to them.
Oh, because the ones at La Mascotte seem like they're not really cooked, and I'm like, I don't want to eat that. It's gross.
No, they were really good, and they had the crab that they had. It wasn't cleaned out, and that grosses me out. When you need to take the shell off, because also in Oregon, we have Dungeness crab, which is so good. And, you take the top off and then you clean all the gunk out, the yucky stuff. And they didn't do that because I think the French people apparently love it. And I'm like, nope.
Oh yeah, a lot of people eat all the guts. It's the same with the Maryland crab. Some people eat all that, and I'm like,
nope.
nope.
I was like, no, thank you.
All right, guys. Well, we hope you enjoyed the show and that you'll tune in next week and head on over to Claudine's website to learn more about her tours, her travel planning, and hang out with her on Sundays for her free live walks around Paris.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.